Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it used to be known as the Snoopers Charter, but that's not a phrase you'll have heard passing the Home Secretary's lips today. Nevertheless, snooping is essentially what the new surveillance bill proposes. Internet firms will have to store data on what people access online for a year, so the security services can, if needs be, pore over it. Theresa May did try and head off her critics, though, by giving a High Court judge a power of veto. But it's a veto which wouldn't apply in urgent circumstances. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
Nearly 20 years ago, the intelligence services began trawling internet records en masse. 2 years ago, Edward Snowden revealed what they were doing. Today, the Home Secretary tried to reassure people that judges would have to sign off on such swoops in the future.
The Secretary of State will need to be satisfied that an activity is necessary and proportionate before a warrant can be issued. But in future, the warrant will not come into force until it has been formally approved by a judge. This will place a double lock on the authorisation of our most intrusive investigatory powers.
In future, in addition to the Home Secretary, the intelligence services will need approval by judges before accessing bulk communications data, searching for patterns or keywords. Likewise, the Home Secretary's power to sign off intercepts will need judge approval, and a power to demand that a communications company allows intelligence services to interfere with or hack into a customer's equipment. Everything's being put on a proper legal footing. You must be thrilled.
Well, it looks like that at first sight, but then you look at the rules that bind the judges who've got to check the Home Secretary, and you find the rules that say they can only focus on the procedure. They can't check the evidence, they can't check the Home Secretary's got it proportional, they can't do the things that we really need, because she signs off over 2,500 of these things a year, always under time pressure, and therefore we have to be sure she gets it right. It doesn't do that.
It establishes the vital principle that warrants shouldn't enter into force until they've been signed off by an independent judge, except in very urgent cases. What's important is that the judges should not be rubber stamps, and that means that they must be properly supported in what they do, and they must be in a position to question things if they don't think that they're quite right.
One of the most controversial measures in the bill requires telephone companies and internet companies to keep records of who you phoned, what websites you went to and when. The records will be kept for up to 12 months. Police above superintendent level will be able to access them. No judge's sign-off would be required. The information would be limited, but could be very revealing. This communications data wouldn't reveal the exact web page you looked at, but it would show the site it was on.
So if someone has visited a social media website, an internet connection record will only show that they accessed that site, not the particular pages they looked at, or who they communicated with, or what they said. It is simply the modern equivalent of an itemised phone bill.
You've got to have judicial supervision of this kind of thing. The powers that we're seeking are actually more extensive than I think they have in America and elsewhere. And I think I really would like to see a judge involved before you had police going around, just plucking people's email accounts, people's, his electronic histories out of the ether.
The man who was Deputy Prime Minister stopped Theresa May's last bill in its tracks wasn't ready to trust her again.
Her last bill on this fraught but important subject hit the buffers, but this bill is a much improved model, though I have the feeling that under the bonnet it still retains some of the flaws of its predecessor.
The man with the claim to have started all this, Edward Snowden, tweeted from Moscow that Britain now had the most intrusive and least accountable surveillance regime in the West. It's a slower track draft bill, so Parliament won't vote until next year.
Gary Gibbon, so that's the politics, but will the new proposals actually work? Can the security services, even with enhanced powers, really get to grips with the dark web, where so much clandestine activity is based? Here's our technology reporter, Jeff White.
Very affordable. These were the kind of gadgets we were all using when the last surveillance law was passed at the turn of the century. Fast forward to now, and the amount of technology we use and the data it generates has exploded. The government says today's proposals are an attempt to drag surveillance into the 21st century. Central to their plan, measures to record website visits in the same way our phone use is tracked. So, traditionally, this is how your phone gets monitored. When you call someone or send a text, the phone company keeps a record of who you contacted, when, and roughly where. But here's the thing, if you use your phone or your computer to message someone through, say, Facebook or Twitter, the phone and internet companies don't keep a record of those websites you used. The police say this risks leaving them in the dark. So the plan is for your internet provider and phone company to store for a year the websites you look at, although not the individual pages.
TalkTalk, a brighter home for everyone.
But as we know from the recent hack of TalkTalk, any such stockpile of personal data is sought after by hackers. Some in the industry fear the new law would make them even more of a target.
Well, this is clearly sensitive personal data, and it will always be at risk from people looking to hack and misuse that data. So the data has to be stored in a very safe and secure way, and it also has to be there have to be strict processes in place to make sure that when that data is accessed, that is also highly secure and highly safe. So the challenge is both one of storage, but also the processes in terms of access to that data.
And that's presuming there's any data to access. You leave no trace of your browsing habits if you surf the dark web, and crooks are increasingly using these hidden websites. So will these new powers actually catch a new breed of tech-savvy criminals?
You can use all sorts of different technologies that are out there to circumvent it. The government has said this is a bit like an itemised phone bill. Well, we all know that criminals don't go and get an account with with BT and then use their home phone number to plot their evil schemes. They use burner phones and that kind of thing to get round this.
Burner phones, dark websites, it's all a world away from most people's technology use. But the snooping being proposed won't discriminate between wrongdoers and the rest of us, leaving us with the basic question: how much intrusion should the many put up with to catch the few?
Our technology correspondent, Jeff White. Well, a little earlier I spoke to Sarah Thornton, the former Chief Constable of Thames Valley, now the first head of the new National Police Chiefs Council. I asked her whether today's measures are what the police want.
Law enforcement needs communication data to help us protect the public and to investigate crime. We need to modernise the laws. The sorts of information we could get on phone records years ago is less relevant now because people are communicating via the internet. We need those internet connection records. The bill published today gives us access to internet connection records in certain circumstances. We did ask for more, but we're very content with access to IP addresses, that's internet protocol addresses, to the illegal sites, but also to communication platforms. They're the ones that really make a difference.
What more did you want?
Well, for example, if a criminal was planning to book flights, we might have wanted to know which apps they were using or maybe what banking apps they were using. But the important thing, I think, is that we get the communication platforms. That's the key thing, because it's the whole spectrum of policing that uses this sort of information, not just terrorism.
What people in the street possibly are worried about is that you'll access material that isn't actually relevant but might be interesting.
The Independent Review of Terrorism asked us to make the operational case. I think in terms of dealing with vulnerable missing people, investigating paedophilia, investigating robbery, investigating drug supply. There's a very, very strong case. I'll give you a good example. There was an operation called Voicer, an organised crime group of paedophiles who were brought to justice earlier this year. The gang are all in prison. We know that about 260 people viewed the images, which were of the abuse of babies and toddlers, which had been streamed live on the internet. There are 38 people who viewed those images who we've never been able to identify. If we had the internet connection records, we could find out their IP addresses and then find them.
Now, you're being given more facility to do what you need to do, but with fewer people. You're just about to suffer pretty serious cuts in both funding and personnel.
What we've argued is if there are going to be fewer police officers and fewer staff, they need to be better equipped with technology, better informed, better connected with other organisations.
Do you have enough personnel?
I think with colleagues yesterday, We are very concerned that we've lost over 40,000 officers and staff over the last Parliament, and we fear what we might lose over the next 4 years. That's why we've been putting a very strong case to Treasury, to the Home Office, that we need officers and staff.
Are they listening?
The Home Office are definitely listening.
Sarah Thornton, thank you very much for talking with us.
Well, I'm joined now by Laurie Love, who's fighting extradition to the United States for allegedly hacking into various agencies, including NASA. He denies the charges. Laurie, the Wikipedia founder, Jimmy Wales, said today that he thinks this bill is stupid. Do you agree?
It's 299 pages, so you'd have to go into it a bit more detail than stupid. I would say there's a lot of things to be concerned about, certainly for yourselves in the media. The government wants the power to unmask your sources and not to inform you when they violated your professional privilege. That's concerning. There's the concerns about the stockpiling of data, which then paints a target on the backs of internet service providers who may then be hacked, like TalkTalk was last week. And if they're compiling dossiers on people's internet browsing, that's a concern for their customers.
Well, I'll come back to the stockpiling in a minute, but I mean, the government says this is just maintaining current intelligence capabilities. And when you think about the fact that the Telecoms Act which governs some surveillance activity, that was made 3 decades ago. So, I mean, it is ripe for some kind of modernisation, isn't it?
Technology evolves, and it evolves faster and faster all the time, so it's necessary for legislation to keep pace with the advances and the developments in technology. What's happening here is that they're retroactively immunising themselves against practices that were questionably legal to begin with, and they're asking for a lot of new powers. So, yes, we do need to revise these laws, but we need to address the concerns, especially in the light of the Snowden revelations.
Well, David Cameron says that it's about keeping the public safe. Will it do that? No matter what your concerns about the extent of the bill, you were talking about this stockpiling of data, so will it achieve its desired effect of keeping people safe?
Things are often framed as a kind of tension between security and privacy, but that's a little bit sophomoric, and it infantilises the debate because you have different kinds of security. So perhaps the police having more power to inspect more browsing habits will allow them to deal with terrorism better or organised crime, but it also decreases the security of everyone whose communications can no longer have an assurance that effective cryptography will be used, because if cryptography can have a backdoor, it's broken, it's not effective.
So it could be about choosing different dangers?
Well, sure, certainly. I mean, if you're here in the City of London, you work for a financial technology firm or a bank, then you're going to have a lot of concerns in the imminent future about what assurances you can give to your clients' data, to your customers' data, if at any time somebody could come knocking and say, break all of your security precautions for us. So
you're an alleged hacker. You'd find it pretty easy to get around this, would you?
Let's say the TalkTalk hack, the leading suspect is a 15-year-old kid from Ireland who, let's diplomatically put it, might have some social adjustment problems. This is not sophisticated stuff. I'm accused of hacking the Federal Reserve Bank, the US military, NASA, various other agencies. There is a problem with security. The general state of play of defensive technology has not kept pace with offensive technologies, and the government is constantly trying to give itself more collection powers, more hacking powers, and more powers to undermine our privacy, and it's not actually giving the security that we need in a digital network society.
Well, how easy would it be for criminals and terrorists to evade the intelligence agencies and, you know, hide on the dark web, the deep web, after these new powers are brought in?
It's not difficult. The technology exists for strong end-to-end encryption, and people who have a risk because their activities are under surveillance, because they're criminals or terrorists, or because they're political dissidents, then they are able to use those technologies effectively. So it's the common Joe, it's your friends and your neighbours who are having their privacy rights violated for questionable gain. I'm not saying there won't be any security gain, but we have to, you know, consider the whole calculus.
Laurie Love, thank you very much for joining us.
I've been getting away